Okay, so we're now going to look at just some things, general things I want to bear in mind before we actually move over to you to bear in mind before we move over to the game. Some to do with the King's Indian defence setups, the Grunfeld setups, any setups where black decides to fianchetto his dark square bishop, because again, this is one of the openings where the Torre is most effective. And we'll have obviously a look at games where these moves are played later on. But after g6, we continue with bishop g5, this is the start of our setup. And now, after bishop g7 here, move order, again, I would say is quite important. And it's worth bearing in mind that when do you play e3, when do you play c3, or when do you play knight bd2? Which of these moves do you play first? And against the King's Indian defence setup, it's worth avoiding playing e3. You can play e3, but our main idea that we're concentrating on is to go e4. So if you play e3, it stops the possibility of going e4. So why do you want to restrict your possibilities here? So c3 is playable, of course, but why not give yourself the possibility of playing e4 in one move? So how do we do that? Well, we go knight bd2. And this is the move which I think makes the most sense, because e4 may be a move to play, and it's certainly a move worth considering. Now, we will sort of have a look at setups where you don't go e4 later on. For example, e3 has been played. It's not my main suggestion here, but if you do get this kind of setup with double fianchettoing, one idea I'm always bearing in mind in these DVDs is an idea of h4. And if you really want to go completely mad and hillbilly, which I probably will when I play this because it's a lot of fun and very difficult for black to defend, ideas of h4, h5 against these setups with g6 can be very effective, as we'll soon see. But as a general rule, let's keep the flexibility just at this stage and go knight bd2. And against every black setup, you just need to think logically, what move in what order do I play and for what reason? And this is something a little bit of experience will help you through. Now after this, black has a number of opportunities here and different ways to play. I mean, it's very flexible and we've got to adapt to each move, of course. Now d5 is one of the main moves. It stops us going e4 straight away. Black can also castle first, because as we said in introduction, d5 will probably come straight away. What other things can black play? Well, c5 is a move that's been played. And now that c5 has been played, a little hint I give to you is that e4 in positions is a lot less effective, because if black is going to get pressure against d4 straight away, I just now recommend we go for our pyramid structure. Kind of give up on the e4 idea for now. e4 was an opportunity, but as soon as black starts attacking d4, let's give up on the idea. Let's just go e3 now. Now, there was a game here which I wanted to show you between Mamedyarov and Peter Svidler, which continued pawn takes d4, pawn takes b6. And this double fianchetto line, I think White's got a very interesting way of playing. So, but first of all, in nearly all these lines I'm showing you, we don't do anything until we finish our development. So you just have to get the move order right at the start. And only when we go c3 and when we go bishop d3 do we only now have to consider what plans to play. So this is one of the lovely things about the Torre. We can play the opening pretty much an autopilot as long as you get the move order right. You know, there are certain times when you obviously have to look out for what your opponent plays, but here, what plans are we doing against g6 and what plans become more effective? Well, bishop a6 was a plan that Peter Svidler played here, and one plan I really enjoy here is Mamedyarov just took that one off, queen e2, and after knight h7, he now plays h4, and this is something we're going to see throughout this DVD. I'm going to give you plans with h4 when g6 has been played. I'm also going to give you another plan, a safer option. But h4 is a move I always want you to consider. Now, when is h4 more effective in these lines with bishop g7? Well, for a start, it's more effective in these lines than the Nimzo-Indian lines because black has played g6. So when we play h4 and h5, we have something to attack, and we have the H file to open up. We take on G6, the H file becomes open, we attack on the H file. The other times I would consider H4 is when we have control of the center. And one of the great things about putting your Torre pawns like this is that it gives you a very strong hold on the center, because if the center is more open, then H4, attacking on the wing, is not going to work as well. If your king can be exposed quickly in the middle, then attacking on the side of the board is not a good idea. But here, the king cannot be exposed, so why not attack with H4, H5? And this is just one example when this idea of H4, H5 is effective. For example, B5, H5. And again, we're generally not worried about losing this pawn, because if black ever takes on H5, well, it just gives us an open H file to attack along. And we can even play stuff like Queen E3 with a very simple plan: swap bishops, get the queen to H6 with G4, checkmate. And this is just one example when I want you to bear in mind the H4. But when you do go for H4, it's much more effective when black has played G6 and when you're controlling the center. You have to watch out for some certain things for this. So let's have a look at other setups when this may well be playable. Okay, so let me just find my analysis here. So there are loads of different ways this can be played. Okay, so, well, let's now go for have a little look at when black plays D5. Remember, D5, C5, D6 are the three moves to watch out for. But again, against most of these, you can keep the same kind of setup. If black doesn't play D5, you keep the possibility of going E4. But when he does play D5, it's very hard for you to play E4. So you can now go for E3 and C3. So let's just do that. So now E3 is okay. Castles. Bishop D3, why not develop before going C3? And what should black do now? Well, let's say black goes knight B D7. And against knight B D7, we play C3. And one of the reasons I'm not castling yet is that we're waiting to see what black now plays. Because if black does something with C5, well, yet again, we can think about ideas of H4. Why? Because we're controlling the center, so our king is quite safe. Black can still not attack the center. As a general rule, before going H4, H5, Queen E2 is a very useful move. Why is Queen E2 a useful move? Number one, we can castle queenside. Number two, it allows E4 in some positions to become stronger. But it's just a useful waiting move. I mean, we can still castle kingside if we so wish, but after a slow move like B6, which is logical, trying to put the bishop on B7, this is an example when, again, I want you to think outside the box. Because, yes, castling is something we will look at, but is black going to open up the center? No. Has black played G6? Yes. So now H4 can come. And this is something which I think, like I say, if you're a very aggressive player, I really do think this is an idea I certainly want to play myself, with the idea of playing H5 and attacking over here. So again, these are the another example of when H4 might be good, when black can't open the center and when you can get some quick play over on the king side. Now, let's have a look quite possibly at what else you can do if you do castle. Now, the more positional line. So instead of that idea with Queen E2 and H4, and we'll look at these in more detail later, if you don't like that, and that is more risky, a very key idea is after B6 has been played, and this is actually something I should have mentioned in the NIMSO, a key idea is A4. A4 is another key thing that you need to be aware of in the Torre. You want to be able to use that pawn to nibble away at black's queen side, and you often combine this move with B4. So for example, bishop B7 is a move that's been played, and now the next move is another key idea. Black may be threatening to go knight E4, so you want to control that square. And a key move to remember is Queen B1, and this is a favourite move of players such as Kramnik. we've given up on the h4, h5 idea if we've castled, so this is a more positional way of playing. So I'm just giving you that second option. And this is probably the more, I would say, sensible way to play. Why is the queen good on b1? A couple of reasons. We want to go b4, threaten to go pawn takes c5, and our queen will be hitting the bishop on b7. If black plays c4 at all, well, now our bishop can drop back to c2, and because the centre has become closed, our main break here is pawn to e4. This is what we're going for. This is why we don't put the queen on c2, because our bishop would not be able to drop back here. Also, in these positions, we're threatening, well, we're stopping black from playing knight to e4, because he'd lose a pawn. So let's have a look. Something like h6, these kind of things have been played. And given a chance, we're simply now going to play b4, gaining space on that area of the board. And this can be very effective. Queen c8 has been a move played, but now a5 comes. So ideas of playing a5 against b6 combined with b4 are very effective. And often when you go for these plans, the queen is better placed on b1. So this is the queen side attack idea rather than the h4, h5 idea. Right, let's just try to find some other lines. Well, okay, so we just looked at when this was playable, and this idea of queen b1 is playable in a lot of positions. Now, you can think about doing this, like I say, against b6. That, you know, when black plays d5 and c5, so this is the first setup, you have these two options. You can either castle kingside and go for a4 and b4, and the other option is to go for the h4 idea. So queen e2 is even more useful when b6 has been played, because we stopped bishop to a6, and h4 again is something which I think you'll have a lot of fun with, this move, and we'll have a look at examples. So if you want to go for the crazy h4 h5, we'll have a look at when that does work, but you have that choice, and you have the positional queen b1 and a5 plan. But these are the typical things you should really bear in mind. Okay, so what other things do we have to have a look at? We'll come to this game particularly later on. And I know I'm spending a lot of time on these things. You know, it's always easy to miss stuff, isn't it? I hope I haven't missed stuff. You know, if I have, I'll come to them. But I'm trying to think of things that I found important when preparing this and things I want to bear in mind. And I'm trying to throw them all at you now, because then you'll be covered as much as I possibly can cover you for the time being. So what else have we got? Well, let's just have a look at other things. Well, if d6 is played, well, this is another setup. Well, now we certainly can consider this e4 move. And things I want you to bear in mind here is that e4 is totally playable now, because d5 is not a problem. So we will have a look at that one. Certainly, let's just see if I can find my stuff there. Okay, so let's just get another move order. So, for example, rather than d6 straight away, it doesn't matter. Let's say black castles. Now, if we go e4 too soon, and black hasn't moved the d7 pawn, d5 is a good move. So we want to wait until black plays d6 before we go e4. So what's a useful move? Well, e3 here, I would say, limits your possibilities, because you can't go e4. A better way to play this, and again it's just logic, is to play c3, because it still gives us the opportunity of going e4. Now, if d5 here, we play e3, we're back in the similar kind of positions we have been looking at. And if d6, what do we now do? Now we play e4. So this is when it's slightly different. In these positions, this might occur if your opponent's a Keynesian defense player. Black now has two main options, and the main thing we're looking at is c5. If black doesn't play c5, what do we do as a rule? Let's say he goes knight b d7. Well, this is not a very good square for a knight, and this is when really our plan, I really like this Torre opening, and it's much more effective than when you have a pawn on c4, because here an idea with bishop d3 followed by queen e2 and e5 can be very effective, and if you want to, you can still go for h4 h5. The knight is actually very badly placed here, and unlike a King's Indian, if black ever plays c5, because we have a pawn on c3, This is well defended. A better move order for black, if he wants to do this, is to go c5 straight away, because now if we try to play bishop d3 here, black has the c6 square for his knight. So bishop d3 is a mistake against an early c5, because black could do something like takes on d4 and now kick our bishop, and he can start attacking this pawn here. With the knight coming to c6, I quite like black's possibilities here. With a knight on d7, this doesn't work so well, so we can maintain our position. So what should we do against an early c5? Well, what we should play when the knight is still on b8 is to just take on c5 and now develop our bishop to the most active square, bishop c4. Something like knight c6, and here the most flexible move is queen e2. Because if we castle straight away in these positions, instead of queen e2, black has the annoying move knight to a5, and our bishop would like to come back to d3 now, but it can't, and our bishop doesn't have a good square here. So the reason we play queen e2 first in these structures is that if knight a5, our bishop can come back to d3. And the little trick worth remembering here, which has occurred actually in a lot of Grandmaster games, is that if black plays h6, we actually now, when we have the queen on e2, and this is really only works because our queen on e2, we can take on f6. When black really has to take back with a pawn, because if he takes back with a bishop on f6, can you see a way that white can win a pawn? And this is a very well hidden trick, and it only works because the queen is on e2. How can white win a pawn here? Queen e3. And white actually just wins the safe pawn. So this is another thing well worth considering. So that's d6. Now we had a look in these sort of King's Indian lines where black plays d5 and c5. So against the d5 and c5 lines, we can either go for the king side attack, we're looking at examples of this, or we can go for our queen side attack. We've looked at lines where white plays d6 in these positions, where I'm recommending e4. Now, what about the last thing I just want to cover? What about if black plays d5 and now plays for e5? Well, this is probably the only sort of semi-complicated line you have to know in the Torre attack. The thing you should play here, in my opinion, is bishop d3. This was considered to be a mistake for quite a number of years, because it was thought that when black plays e5, e4 will be very annoying because it will attack the bishop on d3. But the point is, after rook e8, and remember here, if black plays c5 now, you have the possibility of either playing positionally with castles, queen b1 and b4, and when black plays b6, he gives us something to attack. How do we attack it? We attack it with our a pawn. Or if you want to play the more tactical line, after c5, we go queen e2, h4, h5. And again, examples of these will come up. Depends what you want to do. Maybe you want to look at both of them and decide for yourself. But if black plays rook e8 now, it's clear that black wants to play e5. So in this case, ideas with h4 would not be very clever, because h4 is only working when black cannot open up the center, because you cannot leave your king. You can't do a wing attack when the center's been opened up, and you really have to be quite concerned about a move such as e5 here when the rook is lining up against your king. So again, each case is different and you have to work it out for yourself. But what I would say against rook e8, and the reason that this line works quite well for white, is that if black does go for this now e5 break, how do we meet this? We've got to meet this with the move e4. Otherwise, why put the bishop on d3? And this opens up the position to our favour. Why? Because look, we have all our minor pieces developed. On the other hand, black has this bishop on c8, and the bishop on c8 is very badly placed. So opening up the position should favour the player with a better position pieces, and in this case, that is us. And really, I mean, I know that's kind of a lot to take in, and I do recommend you look at both of the, these first bits a couple of times. And if you are a bit confused now, well, I'm sorry about that. It's easy to get confused when learning something new, and I'm trying to just throw everything at you, because even if you can't take everything in, I think subconsciously a lot of what I said will stay with you, and the games I've got lined up for you now will basically confirm what I've said. So the things I've said will link into the games and the examples that I have, and everything should become quite clear for you. So I've just thrown a lot of information at you, a lot of ideas that you've got. I've given you sort of an overview of some of the things I want you to remember, some of the main things. You have these different ways to play, and of course there's lots of other things we should look at, but for now I consider the things that I've gone over there to be the most important areas to bear in mind when you're playing this Torre Attack. And now hopefully you can sit back and enjoy some of the fun games I have prepared.